to you.
Here's one.
Oh, thank you.
It's not really spare.
Whose was it? Okay.
Oh.
That's okay. I read the instructions.
Okay.
I want to make sure we're doing it exactly. Okay, so somebody besides Alicia, because she's going to answer the next question. Somebody tell me what we were supposed to do on this sheet. What was the purpose of it?
Fill in the answers. Oh. Wait a minute. This was about the short story, writing a short story about the midwives.
Yes. Yeah, explain in your own words
Yeah.
the account of the midwives, what they did. That's from memory, not looking it up in the scripture. If you did look it up, that's okay. But what did Alicia? What do you have?
I just wrote that the midwives feared God more than they did man, and they realized the sanctity of life, and so they didn't obey. And then God blessed them and continued to multiply them in spite of the heart of the people who killed the babies.
Yes.
The boys.
Okay. That's exactly what we're looking for. Does anybody have anything else to add to that?
Where's Hannah?
Do you remember who the midwives were? It's the ladies who were delivering the babies for the. That's their job, is to deliver the babies for the women. They still, I don't know whether they have midwives in Germany. They probably do. I know they still have.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody have anything to add to that? Okay, so Pharaoh had said to the new Pharaoh, Pharaoh has said to the midwives to kill the male children and save the daughters alive, okay, of the Israelite children, okay. They feared God. They obeyed God instead of man. What did they say? What happened when Pharaoh asked them, "How come you're not obeying me?"
Didn't they say that they couldn't do this evil against God?
Yeah. What excuse did they give?
They said the wives of the Hebrews, they are not like the women in Egypt, they are strong and so.
Oh, because they would deliver before the midwives could get there, they said.
Okay. So basically, they're saying they're telling Pharaoh, "Look, we're not. There's nothing we can do. The babies are already delivered before we get there." Now, has anybody heard an unbeliever use that as a sticking point against the Bible? The Bible is contradicting itself because the Bible says not to lie, and here are these midwives lying to Pharaoh. Yeah, sure, they're doing it to save the babies, but they're still lying, so there's something wrong here with the Bible. Has anybody heard that? No? It's pretty common. I've heard it before. Were the midwives lying?
The Bible doesn't say.
Exactly. There is no indication in here that what the midwife said is not true. But yet I have still heard that the midwives were lying to Pharaoh in order to save the babies. Okay? So, and I've never heard anybody say that when the midwives lied that they're wrong. I've heard people say, so obviously the Bible is not really accurate when it says that all lying is sin, because here they were lying and they were doing right, so the Bible is wrong. Well, there's no indication at all that they were lying at all. Okay, let's read those verses. We're going to go back and read 1 through 14 again, but right now let's read verses 15 through 22. I'll read first, and then Ammon, and then Torsten, and so on. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And Ammon, verse 16, Exodus chapter 1. I'm sorry, I forgot to say where we are. We're in the Bible.
Exodus 1, verse 2.
16.
And he said, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live.
Aber die Hebammen fürchteten Gott und taten nicht, wie der König von Ägypten ihnen gesagt hatte, sondern ließen die Kinder leben.
Da rief der König von Ägypten die Hebammen und sprach zu ihm, warum tut ihr das, dass ihr die Kinder leben lasst?
19. Just like a cat.
And the midwife said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered, bear the midwives. Therefore God drove well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses.
And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive.
All right, so he finds that he can't trust the midwives to do what he said, so he's telling his own people, you're going to kill the Israelite male children. Okay, so here it is. The midwife said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. Therefore, because they told that lie, God dealt well with the midwives. No. Because they lied. Okay? We know that they did. Not only is there no indication that they did lie, but there's also positive indication that they did not lie. Why? Because God dealt well with the midwives. Not only did they follow God's command instead of man's command, but they were truthful. No, we're not going to obey you. Okay? They didn't come right out and tell Pharaoh they're not going to obey him, but they told him the reason that they're not doing what, not the real reason. They told him the circumstances. This is why it's not happening, because babies are already delivered when we get there. Okay. Now, I just wanted to clear that out because I'm glad that none of you have heard that or had that doubt, but that doubt is out there. It's actually a very popular target for unbelievers to pick at the Bible and say that it must be that not all lying is sin, because if you lie to save somebody's face, if you lie not to hurt somebody's feelings, or if you lie to save the babies alive. Okay.
Brother Tony?
Yes.
God even, you could argue that, because when Abraham lied about Sarah, God didn't condone that, and his motive was to save her life, but yet God punished him for it.
Yeah.
You could even use that as an argument.
Exactly. Because his trust was in his tricking Pharaoh and Abimelech instead of relying on God to save his life. And it wasn't actually Sarah's life he was trying to say, it was his own life. Yeah. She'll take Sarah, they'll take Sarah and they'll kill me. So you need, okay. So, yeah, Abraham told Sarah to lie. Sarah obeyed Abraham. And God put Abraham in a hard position and Pharaoh. Okay. What exactly, while we're on this subject, what exactly does the commandment in the Ten Commandments say about lying?
Thou shalt not lie.
No, not quite.
That should not bear false witness.
Yeah. Don't lie for the purpose of bringing an accusation against somebody who's innocent. Okay. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Now, we do find in the New Testament several times that lying is a sin. And that's not limited to bearing false witness. But as far as the commandment itself, in the Ten Commandment in Exodus 20, it's not lying in general, it's this particular type of lying. But nevertheless, the midwives did not lie. Okay? In case there was any doubt there. Let's go back again, just for review. Let's go back even farther. Let's do our memory verse and then pray. Okay? I'm sorry, we've gotten started backwards. Okay? Who could say Genesis 50:19? Hannah should be able to say it. Yeah, Lisa?
And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for I am in the place of God. But as for you, ye thought evil against me. God meant it unto good with me, also this day to save much people. Alive.
Very good. Yeah. Am I in here telling me? If you go up in inflection at the end, you're asking me a question. Am I right? Am I right? Yes, you're right. Okay, anybody else? Genesis 50:19 and 20. Lisa's about to say it. Lisa is about to say it. You're looking at it and folding over the page to hide it, and you're going to say it to me. Go ahead.
Now I forgot it. What is it? Genesis 15:19 and 20. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye meant evil against me.
You thought.
Ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good. To bring to pass that it is this day to save much people alive.
Yeah, very good. Genesis 50:19 and 20. I was able to talk at great because of what happened with the van Friday morning. I was able to talk at great length about that verse and about the story of Joseph to my boss on Friday, and he's convinced that this is God's way of telling me that I shouldn't be driving such an old vehicle because they're not safe, because they don't have the stability control on the road. But I told him that may be, but I believe that he's also testing my faith and trying to lead me in a certain path that I'm just going to see where he leads me in this, because I don't know what he's doing, but I know that he has a plan. Okay, so let's have a word of prayer, and we'll continue. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you that everything we see, everything we read in your word shows us how much you love us, and how dependable you are, how faithful you are, and how holy you are. And it shows us that you are in control. Lord, I pray that you will help us to surrender to you and give our plans to you, give our lives to you, and just let you handle all the details. Let you lead us where you want us to lead us. where you want to lead us. And help us to just to trust you with in everything that you do. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, very quickly, I'm going to read through I'm going to start verse 6 and read through verse 14. That'll be the review of the foundation of what we're covering, and then we'll continue farther on. Okay. Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. In other words, all their labor, all their service, they were being beaten with whips and driven hard until they were dropping. Okay. Okay, now, we're going to skip over the birth of Moses and go to Exodus 2, verses 23 through 25. MM, if you will read 23, and then Torsten and Yvonne.
Verse 23, and it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Egypt were sad by reason of the bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage.
Gott erhörte ihr Wehklagen und Kratzen seines Bundes mit Abraham, Isaac und Jakob.
And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them.
All right, so what did the children of Israel do?
They cried unto God.
Sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried. And the cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. Okay? Does it actually say that they're crying to God?
No.
Not really, but we hope that they were. But
Kind of be implied.
yeah, it's kind of implied that they're crying to God. But whether they were crying to God or just crying and bemoaning, it's every time I've read the account of Exodus, I kind of get the idea that the children of Israel living in the land of Egypt have completely forgotten about God. The Bible doesn't actually say that. That's just an idea that I have in my mind. So it may not be true. I mean, they may have continued worshiping Him with sacrifices and everything. I don't know. But it just seems that there's so much re-education that has to go. This is how you serve God. This is who God is. It just seems to me that they've completely forgotten about Him, and now, after 400 years, God is visiting them again and reminding them, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the one who has promised to deliver you, and now it's time. Okay. So, God heard your groaning. God remembered His covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And remember, we've talked about that, we reviewed that last week. The promise that God made to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then also through Jacob to Joseph, that the land of Canaan was theirs. Okay? And what else did He tell Abraham? About this time period. I think it was Genesis 15. He told them, he told Abraham, your descendants are going to serve in Egypt for 400 years, and then I'll deliver them. Okay, and now it's time. God didn't have to wait until the right opportunity. He wasn't just waiting for a chance to come along that he could deliver them. Maybe the right man will come along and I'll be able to use him. This was God's plan from the beginning. When you go, your descendants will go into Egypt. They're going to serve for 400 years. They're going to be slaves. After 400 years, I will deliver them. Now the 400 years has passed, and God says, okay, now it's time. And God did not have to wait for anything. God didn't have to look for somebody. God, it's time, and here's the man that I've already put in place because this is my time. Okay? Turn to 1 Samuel 12, verse 8. And I'll ask Lisa to read that one. 1 Samuel 12, 8.
When Jacob was coming into Egypt, the Lord cried unto the Lord, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron with God forth your fathers out of Egypt, and made them dwell in this place.
All right, so there we see, I'd forgotten this when I made a statement a few minutes ago. In the passage that we read in Exodus 2, it doesn't say that the children of Israel cried to the Lord. Alicia said it's implied. Yeah, it is implied, but here in 1 Samuel, they cried unto the Lord. Okay, so I had forgotten about this verse when I made that statement before. Yes, they cried unto the Lord. So what was the Lord's response when they cried unto the Lord?
They cried.
What did he, according to this verse, what was his response? What did he do? Yeah, he sent Moses and Aaron. Was it because they cried that he sent Moses and Aaron? Not really. It was because that was his plan from the beginning. Okay. Taking Exodus 2, 23 through 25 and 1 Samuel 12, 8 together, what happened to the Pharaoh who had enslaved the Israelites? I'm sorry, I should have asked you to hold your finger in Exodus 2. And maybe we'll flip back and forth between those two for a couple minutes. What happened to the Pharaoh?
He died.
Yep, this one died. Okay, this is the Pharaoh who enslaved the Israelites, and he's the Pharaoh who commanded the midwives to kill the male children. Now he's dead. A new Pharaoh comes along, and he inherits millions of slaves. So he's not going to change the way things. He's happy with the status quo. And we got all these slaves. They're ours. They were my father's. Now they're mine, and we're going to keep on working them. Okay? So, how much time has passed from the time that they were enslaved until this time that God sent Moses and Aaron?
Full 400 years or less than that?
Less than that.
100 years?
Yeah. We don't know how much. It could have been 100 years, but it was at least 80 years. Okay, because the children of Israel were already enslaved when Moses was born. It may have been just a few days. The command may have gone out, and then God said, And also, you're going to start killing all the male children, and then the next day Moses was born and was saved. I don't know. The Bible is not clear on that, how much time passed. But they were enslaved before Moses was born, and how old was he when he came back to Egypt? 80 years old. He was. What response did the Israelites have? Yeah, and again in verse 23. Verse 23 and 1 Samuel. By reason of the bondage. Yeah. And they cried unto the Lord. Okay. That's what we need to do when we have problems. We don't complain about it. We cry unto the Lord. And
what you said, they forgot. Maybe God, but maybe the story of Joseph was told over the generations. And
yeah.
now in that time, it's so hard, and some says, oh, we need to.
Yeah.
Maybe some guy leading today, we need to try to God. So that's
yeah. It God has he's not limited by man's ideas of what he's doing. He's not limited to one purpose in his actions, as many times we are. He can be doing one thing that has a whole lot of different effects on different people or on everybody, whatever. He's always in control and working things out according to his own plan. And in addition to fulfilling his word to Abraham, in addition to showing his mighty power in bringing them out of Egypt and destroying the Egyptians, in addition to giving them the wealth of Egypt as they left, so that they would go back into their own country wealthy. In addition to all that, the bondage is almost certainly God's way to bring them back to depending on Him. All this time, you've been living on your own, doing your own thing, perhaps, I don't know, but I'm going to bring you back now. You're going to cry to me. You're going to see how much you need me, not your own strength. Okay? So, through all the bondage, the rigorous servitude, they cried to the Lord. All right. What four responses did God have to the Israelites' cry? We'll have to pick through both sets of verses for this.
He remembered his covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham.
Yep. And first, before that, the one before that, he heard the groaning. He remembered his covenant. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually, when I include 1 Samuel 12:8, we've got more than four. Okay, so the four in this question were just for the first Exodus chapter 2 passage. Okay, he heard the groaning, he remembered his covenant.
God looked upon the children of Israel.
He looked upon the children of Israel.
and the Egyptians started fear.
And he had respect unto them. Okay? And then in 1 Samuel 12:8, more responses that we're told about. He sent Moses and Aaron, which brought forth your fathers out of Egypt and made them dwell in this place. Okay? So the five responses. Okay, we've all heard the story. So what is going to happen as the story moves forward? What's going to take place? Very, very quickly. Very, very quickly.
He's going to go before Pharaoh and deliver the people.
Yeah. Going to go before Pharaoh and deliver the people. Lots of plagues. The Egyptians are going to suffer. The Israelites are going to see God's mighty power. He's going to bring them out with a mighty hand, a stretched out arm, and get glory from bringing them out. The children of Israel had been enslaved and were calling out to God to free them from the bondage. We know that God had already told Abraham that this bondage would end. Since these events were only a few generations removed from Joseph, the knowledge of the promised inheritance was surely present with the elders of Israel. God was preparing to send a deliverer. We skipped over the birth of Moses, but we're going to come back to that in a couple of lessons. This says a couple of weeks. It's going to, you know me, it's going to be a lot more than a couple of weeks before we get a couple of lessons. We know that God is faithful and merciful, and he had heard the cries of the Israelites. Let's briefly talk about some of the extra-biblical evidence that supports a large number of Hebrews having been enslaved in Egypt. We'll look later more closely at some of the differences in chronology seen in the biblical text and historical recreations from archaeology, because that's another example of how unbelievers have rewritten history and reinterpreted archaeology in order to show that the Bible can't be true. But we know when there's a difference, it's the archaeologists that are wrong, or it's the scientists, the chemists, the geologists, whatever. If they don't agree with the Bible, then they're wrong. So they just need to go back to their evidence and rethink it. According to the new chronology of Egypt, which considers that many of the Egyptian kings had overlapping reigns, because that's one of the things they had done automatically, they assumed this king died, another king took his place. He lived a certain number of years, or reigned a certain number of years, he died, another king took his place. And now they've realized that it wasn't actually that way. There were sometimes, especially with the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, the middle kingdom, Egypt was not always united under one pharaoh. There were multiple pharaohs ruling in overlapping reigns. Okay? And so that has compressed the history, the timeline of the history of Egypt, much shorter period than what has been taught for a long time. The Israelites would have been in Egypt during the 12th and 13th dynasties. Based on this fact and the chronology of Egyptian pharaohs, many scholars believe that Pharaoh Sesostris III could very likely be the Egyptian ruler who arose after Joseph died and began the oppression of the Hebrews. He was the 5th king of the 12th dynasty and was recognized for the cities he built in the Delta, including Bubastis, Kantir, and Ramses, built by Israelite slaves. Okay? Exodus 1, verse 11. I'll turn back to that and read it real quick. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Okay? We know that Ramses was built by Sesostris III, along with Bubastis and Kantir. Okay? And I'm not sure where Pithom is, whether that city has actually, whether the ruins of it has survived, they can find it, or maybe it was, the name was changed to one of these that history records that Sesostris III built. But we also know that the later Pharaoh, Amenemhet III, built 2 pyramids for himself, one at Dassur and the other at Hawara in the Fayum Oasis. The latter, the one at Hawara, was built of sun-dried mud bricks, which was not the usual method of building pyramids. And the outside was faced with smooth white stones. It is likely that these pyramids were also built by Israelite slave labor while they were oppressed. This would be the Pharaoh who took power at some point after the birth of Moses and the death of the king recorded in Exodus 2:23. So this is very likely one of the pharaohs who was ruling during the life of Moses, Amenemhet. When Amenemhet died, his daughter Sobek-Neferu succeeded him, but she only ruled for 4 years, and with her death came the end of Egypt's 12th dynasty. The Hebrews remained in servitude into the 13th dynasty, but their prophesied time in Egypt was close to an end. Now it was God who would act to deliver them and give us one of the greatest pictures of redemption in the Old Testament. What is that picture of redemption that comes through this? Christ brings us the redemption, but there's one of the greatest pictures in the Old Testament of that redemption happens during the Exodus. Anybody have an idea of what that is? There are lots of pictures of Christ's redemption in the Old Testament, but this is one of the most clear pictures, and it happened here in the Exodus. I will pass over you.
When Christ put the blood on the door for the children of Israel.
Yeah, when Moses told the children of Israel to put the blood on the door, the Passover lamb, that...
How was that?
Yeah, I was like, huh? Sorry. I wasn't quite getting what you were asking until you said this.
Yeah, so the Passover is one of the clearest pictures of Christ's redemptive work, because when God sees Christ's blood, the death angel will pass over us. Okay. With the arrival of Israel and his family in Egypt, the multiplying of the descendants promised to Abraham had begun. And remember, there were 70 souls that went to Egypt. But because Joseph was already there. But once in Egypt, they started multiplying greatly. Okay. To add to that, so they began multiplying, but they were in the wrong land. Okay, they were multiplying, they were becoming great as the stars of heaven, but they weren't in the land that God had promised to them. To add to that, the new Pharaoh who had taken over Egypt after the Israelite people had grown in Goshen oppressed them greatly. He had no connection to Joseph or to what Joseph had done to save Egypt and the region from famine. He had decided the Israelites were a threat, and he wanted to eliminate that threat. How quickly we forget. How quickly we forget who are our friends and whom God is using in our lives. Joseph was held in such high esteem by Pharaoh. He had saved the entire country from death. And the entire region round about it. Canaan, people came from Canaan, obviously. He had saved them from death, and Pharaoh elevated him to the second highest ruler in the land, and yet just a couple of generations later, he's completely forgotten, and the children of Israel are a threat to the Egyptians. Perceived as a threat. They weren't really a threat. Okay. He was even willing to order the murder of the male children born to the Israelites to keep them from increasing. But you can't fight against God, can you? Despite the oppression, the Israelites continued to grow. This was all part of God's perfect plan to establish them as a nation in the Promised Land. A deliverer would come from within their nation, and he would lead them out of bondage. This is a picture of what Christ has done for sinners. We're here in this cursed world in bondage to sin, and Christ came as a man to lead us out of bondage and offer us a new hope of freedom from sin, and ultimately a place with him in heaven. That's the new Promised Land. Very quickly, what have we learned about God from his actions toward the Israelites? From the time of Jacob, Joseph, through up till what we're about to start learning now. What have we learned so far about his actions toward the Israelites?
One is that God don't forget his promise.
Yeah, he's faithful. He's been gracious to them. Remember, he saved them from the famine. He sent Joseph on ahead to Egypt to set up the preparations to save them many years later from the famine. Okay? He gave them the gift of large families and productive lives, even as they're living in Goshen, down in Egypt. they're not in the land that God has promised them, but he's still blessing them. Okay, he has led them down there. They didn't. It is not as Abraham and Isaac, who went out of the country away from where God had led them. God has led them down to Egypt. God actually came. If I remember correctly, I don't ever remember reading where God told Abraham, don't go down into Egypt. But he did tell Isaac, don't go down into Egypt. Isaac went down into Egypt. God brought him back. He went down in a time of famine. This time, he actually told Jacob, go down into Egypt, because this is where I want you to be. Okay? How is God's timing evident in the Israelites' bondage, and what comfort can we draw from that example? That's two separate questions. Okay. Do you think the Israelites would have chosen on their own to be in Egypt for 400 years?
No.
No. But God's time is not our time. God's timetable is not our timetable. Okay. Yeah, we want to go down to Egypt because there we can get enough food. And okay, now the famine's over. Yeah, we want to stay here for a little bit because we're doing well. Our flocks are enjoying all this green grass in Goshen, but we want to go back. Our home is up in Canaan. That's where we want to go, but it wasn't time for them to go yet. God kept them there for 400 years. Okay? He allowed them to suffer in Egypt for a time. And he does that to us too. But does that mean that the world is coming to an end because we're suffering? No. It means we don't know what God's plan is, but he has a plan and he's working something out. And when we're going to look back when this is over and say, thank you, God, for bringing me through that. Thank you for making me go that path. Because I've learned more about you. I've learned to trust you. And look at the huge blessing that I got from you that I would not have gotten if I hadn't gone through that suffering. That's the way God works. How can we relate our experiences in life to what the Israelites experienced in Egypt? Sorry, I just entered that. How can you relate? If you have any other ideas.
I think it's a reminder that in spite of hard times, God is always faithful to provide. That in spite of them being in bondage, God never let them go hungry or suffer more than what was in God's plan.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't just abandon the children of Israel for 400 years and then, oh yeah, didn't I leave somebody somewhere? He was with them the whole time. Whether they knew it or not, whether they were recognizing God, worshiping God, I don't really know, but he was there with them, and he was taking care of them, okay? I went a little bit over, but I finished that lesson. It's been a long time since I finished a one-week lesson in 2 weeks. Okay, I don't know yet whether we're going on vacation. I don't know yet whether we'll be here. We're still praying and looking for ways to find a way to go to Spain next week. I don't know yet whether that's going to happen. We're praying. But if we're here next week, then we'll be talking about Moses. And I'm excited. Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you that, Lord, we know your word is true. And there are many times where we see the fulfillment of your word in our lives. And there are other times